Before we start our proceedings, I would ask the religious leaders to offer us some prayers. Imam C, you have the floor.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين وإن تستفتحوا فقد جاءكم الفتح نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر وسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس بحرمة اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقدار العظيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you very much. Bishop Odeko, please.
Lord God of mercy, truth and grace and love, as we continue in the sittings of the TRRC, we pray, Lord, that your Holy Spirit will continue to temper the hearts and minds of all those who are here and those that will be listening even through the media. We pray that it will be possible for us to receive the truth and to be possible for us also to reconcile ourselves to one another as brothers and sisters in this land that you have planted us. We ask that everything will move on smoothly to your honor and to your glory. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much. May the Almighty accept our prayers, bless our proceedings, and guide us through these moments. Council, shall we start the day? Is your witness ready?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. The witness is ready, and we can start now.
You may bring in the witness, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps before we swear in this witness, I just wish to remind that yesterday we did indicate that we would wish to have the statement of Mr. Abubakar Jeng included in the record as an exhibit. That process had not yet been completed yesterday. May I now again ask that you order that the statement of Mr. Abubakar Jeng be added in the record as an exhibit. If you so agree, Mr. Chairman, the exhibit number shall be exhibit 0007.
Request granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Witness, may you stand up, please, and take the oath.
I, Mamat Cham,
I, Mamat O.A. Cham,
swear that I'll speak the truth,
swear that I'll speak the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Cham. Thanks for appearing before this commission. Are you okay to start proceedings?
Good morning, lead counsel and members of the commission. Good morning, the press and members of my family. Very well, I am very ready to continue.
Thank you very much. Let me just prepare your mind to the issues that we would discuss with you. The first thing would be your biographical information, your career in the GNA, a historical overview of the Gambia National Army, the conditions that prevailed in the army between 1990 and 1994, the factors that led to the coup d'etat of July 22nd, 1994, how the coup unfolded and the role you played in that, your eventual fallout with the junta and detention at Mile 2 prison, the events that occurred at Mile 2 prison on 6th September 1994, the detention of Sana Sabali and Sadibu Haidara and the things that happened to them there, your eventual release from detention, life after your release, and how you came back into the army. And then lastly, we would give you an opportunity as a victim and also a senior member of the Gambia National Army to state your views and concerns, the lessons learned, and the recommendations you would want to make to the Commission. Are we clear with that?
Very well, we are very clear.
Thank you. What is your full name, please?
My name is Mamat Cham.
What is your date of birth?
Well, I was born around 1961.
Around 1961 is quite an interesting answer. Do you have a fixed date of birth known to you? If not, we would accept that answer.
Certainly, I think, then, because I am from a village, so precise dates were not known then. But certainly, they can always indicate events, and then I situated later on to the 9th of September, 1961.
Thank you very much for that answer. Where were you born?
I was born in Kermbuguma village, Lower Nyomi, North Bank Division.
Where do you live now?
Presently, I have a compound in Sukuta Salaji, and that is where I am living.
Can you tell us briefly your educational background?
I was enrolled in Cham Primary School, which is about 2 kilometers from Mbuguma. After 6 years of primary education, sat to the common entrance and went to Crab Island Junior Secondary School. This was in 1973. And then after 4 years of education, I left school in 1977 at around the age of 16, 17 years.
What did you do after you finished Crab Island Secondary School?
Well, unfortunately, I was unable to proceed to high school, so I hunted for a job, and I think initially I got a temporary job with the Ministry of Local Government as a registration clerk. Those were then the people who go around the country to register citizens for elections. So it gave me the first opportunity to travel wide in the country at that time.
For how long did you do that job?
I think, as I said, the job was temporal. It was around 6 months, and then after that, it was over. So I went back to where I was.
Did you find another job?
Yes. After that one, I also enrolled to do some private studies, and then eventually sat to the GCE level. But after the GCE level, I also taught 1 year as an unqualified teacher. And then following that, I started an examination with the then Gambia Cooperative Union, and then passed and went through some 4 weeks or 6 weeks of training at the then Yundum Training Center. And eventually, I was appointed as a second supervisor and posted to Nyani Maro in the Nyanija district.
And for how long did you work at the cooperative union?
I worked for 2 years plus some months. Then I think it was, my first year was around 80. The 1981 coup met me at Bakadaji Nyani Maro. Then the following season I also worked, and then after that I left.
Did you pursue any education during that period?
Yes, returning to Banjul, I went back to private studies and then sat to the GCA level. And this was in 83, going December 83.
What did you do after your A levels?
After my A level, I think there was this news that a new national army was to be set up. And then around May or so, May, June, I started the process of enlisting in the Gambian National Army.
Could you tell us about that, please? Your enlistment into the army?
I was enlisted into the Gambia National Army on the 16th of July, 1984. And then I went through basic military training and eventually passed out around November, December. Precise dates are, are not distinct now, but then eventually after the 6 months of basic training, we passed out.
You indicated that at that time the army was being set up, so you decided to enlist. Would I take it from that yours was the first batch of military intake?
Yes, we were designated as the first batch of the Gambia National Army.
And what happened after you finished your training?
After the training, we had a 2 weeks leave. Then, following our return to Yundum Barracks, a junior NCO cadre was set up, and I was shortlisted for the cadre. I went through the cadre, and then I think I qualified and was to be appointed as a Lance Corporal, which is the first rank in the Army. Then, before I was decorated, a commission selection board was also set up, and then I was also shortlisted to go through the commission selection board.
And what was the result of the selection board with regards to you?
Well, thank God I passed, and then I was promoted to the rank of an officer cadet.
Were you alone in that promotion?
No, I think if I can remember well now, there was another soldier, Modu Kamara, Sam Jiba, I think if I can remember also Modu Baji was also part of the soldiers, and then we had some civilians, among which were Pasala Jany, Lawrence Jara, and one Gassama.
And you were all promoted to the rank of officer cadet, correct?
No. I think among the soldiers, it was myself, Modu Kamara, and Sam Jiba who made it through. And then among the civilians, I think Pasala Jany and Lawrence Jara made it through.
What were they to become, Pasala Jany and Lawrence Jara?
Well, following them passing the officer selection board, they had to go through recruit training like any other soldier. And I think eventually they were enlisted and then were trained as soldiers before eventually they were sent on to do some officer basic training courses.
Following your promotion to officer cadet, did you pursue any further training?
Certainly. After my promotion to the rank of an officer cadet, I served bravely in Yundum. And then in April, we had some scholarships from the United States government. It was referred to as an IMET, International Military Education and Training Program, which were grants from the American government. And then I was selected together with then Officer Cadet Babukar Jata and Officer Cadet Sise, Fabakari Sise, to proceed to the United States for military training.
Do you recall which year this was?
This was around May 1985.
And how did that training go?
Well, we proceeded to the United States, and our first port of call was San Antonio at the Lackland Air Force Base, where we did, I think, about 16 weeks of specialized English, because it was a prerequisite of any American training that allied students should undergo a specialized English course before they go on to their follow-on training in other training bases.
And did you eventually make it to Fort Benning?
After graduating from Lackland Air Force Base, we went on to the Fort Benning, which was the home of the infantry, to do the infantry officers basic course.
Did you pursue other trainings apart from infantry basic course?
After the infantry officer basic course, I also did a motor infantry platoon commander's course, and I also did an airborne training, which was what we call parachute, before moving on to another training base, which was, I think, the Special Warfare Center in North Carolina, where I also did a course in civil affairs and an instructor's course.
Do you recall when you returned to the Gambia?
Yes, I think the whole package lasted for about 13 months, and I eventually returned to the Gambia sometimes in 1986.
What did you do upon your return to the Gambia?
It was the tradition that after returning from an extended period of training, you were given what is called a disembarkation leave, which was for 2 weeks. After that, I reported to Yundum, and eventually I was posted to the then Confederal Battalion at the Kudang camp.
Do you recall which period this occurred?
If I can remember, this was late 86, 87, I think so.
For how long did you serve in Kudang?
I didn't stay very long in Kudang. I think 1 month into my postings at Kudang, there was an occurrence at the Katong deployment, which was also another camp of the then Confederate Battalion. The officer who was posted at Katong, then Lieutenant Wilson, I think had a football match. The soldiers had a football match with the villagers, and then after they were defeated by the villagers, I think it didn't go down well with them, and then there was some quarrels, and then I think he decided to impose a curfew. So he was recalled, and then I was substituted in his stead.
What rank did you hold in Kudang at this time?
Well, upon returning from basic training, it was the tradition in the army that young officers would do at least 2 years or 3 before you move on to the next rank. So I was at second lieutenant.
And what position did you hold in Kudang?
I was a platoon commander.
And when you were moved in Katong to replace Lieutenant Ben Wilson, which position did you hold there?
I was still a platoon commander. The only difference was that this was a detached platoon, which means you have no immediate supervision from a senior officer. You were on your own, and then you had a group of men and was given an area of responsibility to patrol and also to train and administer your troops.
And for how long did you serve in this capacity in Katong?
If I can remember very well, I served about 18 months before eventually I was posted back to Yundum, and I was replaced by then Lieutenant Samsudin Sar.
And at Yundum, what role did you now come to be assigned?
I was posted to then Alpha Company as a platoon commander. By then, I have also been promoted to the rank of a lieutenant, that is 2 pips, and then I was also designated as the company 2IC, the second in command.
Which company was this?
This was Alpha Company.
Did you eventually move from the Alpha Company?
Yes, sir. I think after a period of service at the company, I think I was promoted to the rank of a captain, and then I was appointed as the adjutant of 1 infantry battalion.
What does the role of adjutant entail?
Adjutant in an infantry battalion is more like the secretary to the commander. You coordinate the administration of the battalion. Of course, you have a pool of what is called an orderly room. That is where all the write-ups are made, but you make the write-ups for the commander. In a proper regimented army, the adjutant is normally the most junior captain. So, but because of the appointment, you do the work for the commander for him to go and play golf or whatever.
Would you agree that makes you closer to the real power within the barracks?
Well, you are a confidant and a trustee to the commander. And then most of the time, when policies are made, you have some input and influence, yes.
Would you consider that as a privileged position?
Well, you can call it a privileged position, but then it was like a merit-based appointment, because they consider your competence not only as an officer, but also your integrity and your ability to write.
And for how long did you serve as adjutant?
I think I served for over 1 year, and then eventually I was succeeded by, then I think, if I can remember very well, Captain Ann, and I was posted to Bravo Company as the company commander.
And do you recall which year this occurred?
I think this was, if I can remember, the chronology is a little bit distinct, but I think it was between 91, around 91, and then I think I didn't stay long as a company commander. I eventually was sent to Pakistan at the School of Infantry in Quetta to do my mid-career course, which was the company commander's course.
What did you do upon your return from Pakistan?
Upon my return to Pakistan, if I can remember, either before or after going to Pakistan, there was a moment whilst I was the commander of Bravo Company when there was a mutiny by some of the soldiers who had returned from Liberia before.
Can you tell us about that mutiny?
Well, the soldiers, I think, had some dissatisfactions about their conditions. I think the claim was that they were promised that they would be paid upon their return a bonus, which I was not aware of, but then they discussed among themselves, and then not all of them, a group of them, decided to do a mutiny, but this was a mutiny without violence. They decided that they were not going to report for their normal duties, and then gathered around the commander's office.
What happened when they gathered around the commander's office?
When they gathered, I think the commander consulted with some of the officers, and then we decided to take them to one of the training rooms, and I think he also invited the then Gendarmerie commander, who was a Major Pasala Jang, and then there was also the British training team. There was a lieutenant colonel, I forgot the name, and one sergeant major, I think, if I can remember, it was Selos. We spoke to them and then told them that that was against the military order, and that if they had any grievances, they should channel it politely, and then it will be adjudicated and dealt with according to the army rules then existing.
Who was the commander of the army at this time?
The commander of the army was Colonel Ndaunjai, Mamadou Ndaunjai then.
did the soldiers accept or heed to the advice they were given?
No, certainly they didn't. I think after 1 or 2 hours of bantering, some of them decided to bust out of the room, and then some attempted even to rustle some guns from our security deployment, which then, as the company commander in charge, we resisted and then drove them out of the barracks.
What happened after that?
After that, they went to the road from Birkama heading to Westfield. I think they commanded a GPTC bus then, and then headed to Banjul.
Do you know what happened in Banjul when they arrived there?
I think we were able to contain them briefly at the bridge, and then later they were allowed to assemble at the then Makati Square, where the commander of the GNA, Den Daunjai, eventually joined them with Pasala Jain, and then went to the presidency. And then after some discussion, they came and then were able to convince them to calm down and then to return to the barracks.
Do you recall the date this event occurred?
Certainly not, but I think it was within the general time. But the exact date I cannot recall. It must be in the historical records. I'm sure you can dig it out.
1990, would it be at around that time?
1990, 91. I'm not very sure, but I think it was a very significant happening, so we can locate the dates very well.
How many soldiers participated in this mutiny?
I think, if I can recall, between 60 to 80, if I can remember.
Were any officers involved?
No officer was visible, no officer was mentioned. I think it was led by the non-commissioned officers. The one I can remember then was one Sergeant Drame, and then there was also another Lance Corporal Bojang from Birkama.
Were any disciplinary measures taken against any of these soldiers?
Yes, I think when they eventually were persuaded to come back to their senses, they were brought to Yundum, and then we gathered them around the training pitch, and then after addressing them, we detained some of them and took them to Mile 2.
Why did the army do that?
Well, as I said, mutiny is not part of the business of a soldier. The soldier's lot is to do what he's told. If he has any complaints or any this thing, he can politely make his case within the chain of command, and then I'm sure within the space of the military justice system, if the complaints are genuine, it could be addressed.
Do you recall how many soldiers were taken to Mile 2 prison?
I think not all the 80 were taken. We screened them, and those who were found to be the instigators were taken. And then after that, I think there was a board of inquiry, a BOI, that was set up. If I can remember very well, then Permanent Secretary of Local Government, I think, Mr. Tal, is currently serving, I think, in Nigeria in our mission as the ambassador of the Gambia to Nigeria, was the head of that inquiry.
And what happened to your career in the military after that?
Following that, I was posted to Liberia as the 4th Contingent Commander to take over from, I think, then Captain Abdoulaye Conte.
What did you have to do in Liberia?
In Liberia, I was not only the contingent commander for the Gambian detachment, but I was also a contingent commander assigned by my government to the headquarters of ECOMOC. and I was appointed. My appointment at the ECOMOG, which was reserved for Gambians, was to be the camp commandant of the headquarters, responsible for coordinating the security of the ECOMOG headquarters.
What kind of operation was this?
This was then earlier on, I think the West African states had deployed to Liberia a military contingent to go and try to bring sanity into the then civil war, and then, to make sure that, they facilitate a peaceful environment for negotiation. So my assignment coincided with a brief lull in the Liberian civil war, but it eventually escalated back to a fight.
This was a peace enforcement mission, correct?
Yes, it was a peace enforcement mission, certainly.
And for how long did you remain in Liberia?
I was in Liberia for a better part of, I think, 1 year, 4 months, 6 months, precisely.
And what did you do when you returned?
Upon return to the Gambia, I think after the disembarkation leave, I reported back to Yundum. Eventually, I was also nominated to go to proceed to Nigeria to the Command and Staff College at Jaji to do a course as a JD, what we call JD, Junior Division Staff Course.
Do you remember when this took place?
I think the course was about 5-6 months, and then I left the Gambia and returned before end of December 1993.
And what did you do after your return in end of December 1993?
Upon my return, I was posted to the 2 Infantry Battalion, which was then being set up in Farafenye, as a company commander, and also being the most senior captain. I was appointed as the second in command to the then commander, who was a Nigerian Lieutenant Colonel Salik.
And for how long did you stay in Farafenye?
I stayed in Farafenye for, I think, 5 months, because from January, I reported for duties around January. Then by end of June, if I can remember, or thereabout, I was recalled and reposted to the Army headquarters as Staff Officer 2 in charge of operations and training.
You mentioned a Colonel Salik, that you worked under him as the 2IC, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Salik is not Gambian, is it?
Certainly not. He was part of the Nigeria Army Training and Advisory Group, which was earlier contacted by the Gambia government, and through their bilateral relationship with the sister Republic of Nigeria, they were asked to come in and help in the restructuring and the retraining of the then Gambia National Army under the command of Brigadier General Dada.
You telling us that the name of the group was NATAG, N-A-T-A-G, Nigerian Army Training Advisory Group. Apart from training, did the Nigerians carry out any other functions apart from training and advisory function? Did they carry out any other functions?
I think the consequences of the mutiny I earlier mentioned was that after we settled the problem, the then Commander Ndaunjai was redesignated. I think he was posted as the Gambian ambassador to France. And then in the interim, Major Maba Diop was appointed as interim commander of the Gambian National Army. And then during that period, it was during that period that the government of the Gambia approached the then government of Nigeria under, if I can remember, General Babangida. And then I think there was an assistance package to the Gambia in the form of a military training and advisory group composed of a high-level senior officers and junior officers and non-commissioned officers under the command of Dada, who was tasked to command, not only to train, but also to command the Gambia National Army.
Do you recall when the Nigerians arrived in the Gambia? What time?
Again, the precise dates were not very clear, but I think either I was out on that posting in Liberia, or certainly I cannot remember precisely the date.
Would you say they were already in position when you returned from Liberia?
Certainly, because whilst I was there, we had a visit by General Dada to the field, which was a usual procedure. Whenever troops are posted in a conflict zone, it becomes the duty of whoever is commanding them to visit them periodically, to review their conditions and see whether they were properly being commanded and whether the objectives for which they were deployed was being carried out.
Yeah. From your answers, it appears that you're suggesting that the Nigerians also took up command position. Is that correct?
Certainly. Not only were they tasked to train the Gambia National Army, but as you would recall, then when Ndaunjai was appointed as an ambassador to France, I think there was no senior officer earlier on. Then Colonel Gay, Lieutenant Colonel Modu Gay, was also retired for some reason. And then most of the highest echelon of the Gambian command was a major, which was Major Mabat, and then Major Malik Njai. Malik Njai was not a combat regular commission officer. He was a medic, and Maba Job was briefly appointed as the interim commander. But I think the wisdom of the then government, they felt that there was a need to bring in more mature, if I may use the word, or more seasoned officers to help us through to set up the proper army and establish the proper regimentation that all professional armies will require.
And in that arrangement, the Nigerians also assumed command responsibility for the Gambia National Army. Is that right?
Very well, that is true.
Could you kindly describe to us the levels at which the Nigerians were placed as commanders? I
think the position of the commander, Gambia National Army, was a Nigerian. There was also two full bat colonels, Colonel Awonibi and Colonel Akoji, who were appointed as, one was Colonel G1 and the other was G2. One was responsible for training and operations, the other was responsible for admin and logistics. And then below them, we had the battalion commanders. There were also two Nigerian lieutenant colonels. One was appointed commander of the 1 Infantry Battalion in Yundum. The other was the Colonel Salik I earlier mentioned, was appointed the commander of the then 2 Infantry Battalion in Farafenye. And below them, we had various staff officers, and some of them were lawyers, some of them were doctors, there were other officers who were appointed in the training roles, etc., etc.
How about command of the fighting forces, of the troops themselves?
I think if you know the structure of an infantry battalion, which was then made up of 3 infantry companies and 1 what we call an admin company. So the 3 infantry companies made up of 3 platoons, as I said earlier, a company in a normal army is commanded by a captain, a senior captain, or a major. And then the platoons were commanded by lieutenants and second lieutenants. So below the battalion level command, I think we had some Gambians who were fitted into as company commanders and various platoon commanders.
Were there any Nigerians who occupied the positions of company commander?
No, certainly not. Not to my knowledge.
Would you say therefore, that the command role of the Nigerians was limited to the battalion level?
Yes, I think their role or the intention of the then political leaders was not to permanently make them commanders of the Gambia National Army. This was a period of transition, which was a difficult one, because I think the Gambia, unlike most of our fellow West African English-speaking countries, disbanded what was created by the British during the Second World War, immediately before independence or after independence. And so we never had a standing army, but a field force, which was an armed police detachment under the Gambia Police Force. So that created, a skills vacuum and also a knowledge vacuum in the country on the proper way of commanding and administering a regular army.
And what impact did that historical narrative have on the army as it then was in the 1990s?
Because of the fact that there was no continuity in our army structures, then it means we didn't have officers and non-commissioned officers, to carry on the tradition of soldiering. So when the Gambia National Army was set up in July '94, I think first the government resorted to the British government to dispatch a British Army training team, which was good at the time because they recruited soldiers, inducted them to the army, and supervised the training. Of course, they were also assisted by some officers who were moved from the then Gendarmerie, which was earlier established, and then some NCOs as well. But basically, the doctrine and the supervision of the recruit training was done by the British. So essentially what it meant was that the Gambia had no capacity, skill capacity, to run a modern army.
Before you continue on that narrative, point of clarification, did you say that the army was set up in July '94 or you meant '84? Could you clarify that point?
Yes, certainly I think it must have been a slip of tongue, but I meant July 1984.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So you said that the Gambia did not have capacity at the time to run a modern army. Could you explain the rationale behind giving Nigerians command responsibility, as you understood the situation, of course?
Certainly, I think I was not a party to the decisions to contract the Nigerians to come and command the army. But I think at my own level, I felt that the political masters then perceive that, raising an army needs mature guidance. And in the absence of seasoned officers at the local level, then Nigeria, having gone through similar colonial rule and then had a similar administration and a similar doctrine for running an army, became a natural, partner and ally that we can resort to, and then probably see us through that interim time until such a time that Gambian officers could be trained and then guided through to assume their national duties as commanders of a sovereign armed forces.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. But help us here. prior to the arrival of the Nigerians, didn't we have Gambians in these particular positions, which the Nigerians came to assume later?
I think I did state that Colonel Ndaunjai, who I understand was a career police officer following the 1981 events, was appointed as the commander of the Gambia National Army. So yes, we had some security personnel, but certainly not army qualified personnel. So the process of recruiting, training, and equipping an army, takes some time if you are to do it properly. So that not only is the officer supposed to be intelligent, educated, but he also must have some maturity, because an army is not any other institution. We manage violence, and therefore you need to have stable and reliable and dependable commanders who are mature and who understand the national situation, to make sure that they guide the young soldiers and officers maturely for continuity.
So from that answer, do I take it that your view or your understanding of the situation is that there was a maturity gap in the leadership of the army, and the government deemed it necessary, therefore, to bring in more seasoned personnel from Nigeria to guide the army in that development stage? Is that right?
Yes, certainly. That was my view.
You ultimately became staff officer at headquarters, correct?
That's true.
Were you the only Gambian who served at headquarters?
No, I think there were some other officers. As I said, the process of the training was not only recruit training, but also command training and also staff duties training, because an army needs both commanders and then the staff who will prepare the policies, the plans, and the logistics with which to conduct operations. So in the process, I think I was among others. I can remember Babukar Jatta was also at the headquarters. If I can remember, there was also some second lieutenants, okay, and some other officers who were posted into the various cells, what we call cells. In the army, you have what they call G cells. Those are the functions, the intelligence, the civil-military relationship, and the operations and plans, the policies, the logistics, etc. There were various cells in which Gambians, young officers, were seconded to Nigerians, so that gradually they can pick up the process and procedures of running them.
You used the term seconded to the Nigerians. Was that a form of mentoring arrangement, or was it just some other training arrangement?
I think in the civilian parlance, that will be referred to as some sort of mentoring and internship.
Was it the idea that upon the departure of the Nigerians, the mentees would replace them in their positions?
I think that is the natural succession of events. Of course, as I stated earlier on, I was not a party to the decision to contract the Nigerians, but I thought that the political leaders then, had a plan with which the Nigerians would be guiding the Gambia National Army for a period, with a end view that at the end of the day, at the end of the tunnel, they will identify qualified, mature Gambians to succeed them.
And in that regard, the Nigerians would be responsible for making recommendations as to who should occupy what position, correct?
Well, it is the responsibility of any commander to the political master to recommend not only the policies and the logistic requirement, but also the personnel whom, in their view, would naturally be able to carry the responsibility of commanding the army.
In your view, what are the most important achievements of NATAG in the Gambia National Army?
I think there were many, but I can remember that when they came, we didn't have what is called an Armed Forces Act, which they helped to develop. We didn't have also what is called a TACOS, that is the terms and conditions of service for both soldiers and officers, which defines what are going to be the terms of and entitlements of the officers and soldiers. And then also in the restructuring process, we didn't have the structures, as I said, the various structures that will not only give the service support required to run the army, but also designate what the terms of reference for all these various structures are. And I think they did very well in that domain, because up to now, I think basically we are using, what we inherited from them.
Are you referring to the regimentation of the army?
Yes, certainly regimentation is also a very important aspect of running an army, because in the army we have various ranks, and then it is important that everybody understands where you are, and then to do what you are required to do in a disciplined and orderly manner, and also a predictable manner of responding. As a commander, you would also, every time you go to your unit, you expect a particular response. So that is part of the regimentation, yes.
And it is your view that they did very well when it comes to organizing this army in that manner?
Well, certainly, though it takes longer than the period they stayed to be able to do it properly. As I said, these are organizations, and like all natural organizations, there is also not only the objective situation, but there is also a subjective situation. And the subjective may sometimes influence, the end result of the objectivity of whatever you do.
Thank you very much for that. Now let's talk about the conditions that prevailed in the army between 1990 and 1994. In your view, what was it like for the soldiers in the army between 1990 and 1994?
I think you mean between 1984 or to 1994 or what?
1990 to 1994.
I think we will look at it from 1984, because to establish and run an armed forces requires a lot of capital investment. It only not requires building of proper barracks, procurement of equipments, the clothing of the soldiers, and then the acquiring of vehicles and other logistics, uniforms, etc. So at any given time in a developing country like the Gambia, I think there was always a gap between what the ideal and what was available. So in terms of the conditions, the situation was to Gambian standard acceptable, but I wouldn't say compared to other well-resourced countries, it was below what was normal.
Tell us about food for the soldiers.
Well, certainly food has always been, an issue, if I may say so. Maybe there is always an inadequate fish money or whatever you call it, because the feeding is composed of two things. There is the hard ration, which was procured centrally, and there is what is called the condiments aspect, which was a sum of money that was given depending on the size of the unit to the cooks or the ration clerks to go daily and procure from the market. So with all those things, the preparation was also a problem, because it depends on the ability of the cook to manage what was available and then to cook it to be eatable.
Was the food up to standard?
Well, standards are a relative term. When you say was the food up to standard, it means you have a scale. So I don't know what was your barometer then.
Was it good enough?
It was edible compared to what was available generally in society. I think it was okay.
General, grass may be edible, but was it good enough?
Well, grass was not, it was not compared to grass. It was, we use a common term that was water chew. Yeah, but water chew means that the texture of the sauce was not thick enough, but it was edible. There was always a piece of meat or a piece of fish, some vegetables, and rice.
And it tasted salt?
Well, it tasted sometimes when it is domoda, it's fine. When it is chew, which was sometimes difficult because of the proportions were not properly calibrated, then it becomes sometimes difficult.
Would you say that the soldiers were happy about the food?
Well, again, happiness is a relative term. What I term to be good and I can do it will be different from your taste. And as you know, the soldiers were coming from different stratas of Gambian society. So, but by and large, we were able to survive.
Able to survive are the words you used.
Well, certainly, yes.
Do I take that to mean that it wasn't the best, but you were able to manage with it?
It wasn't the best, fine, but it was also okay for the purpose. It was fit for purpose, I would say.
You're speaking like a general in the army.
Well, probably I'm not conscious of that distinction, but certainly yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. How about housing?
Well, housing, we inherited what was then Yundum College. And if I remember very well, the genesis of that barracks was at one point a poultry farm. And then later it was transformed to the then Gambia College for the training of teachers. When Birkama campus was built and the army was being formed, I think we inherited it from government. So I think some people would know that place better, those who are teachers. And then we have some running water, there were some toilets, and then there were dormitories that we had beds in. And then suddenly it was a livable quarter.
Was it adequate for the soldiers, for all the soldiers?
No, certainly not. It was not adequate. And then some of these officers and the senior non-commissioned officers were allowed to rent houses in town and commit to work daily.
Before we conclude the point on the housing issue, perhaps I'll just go back to food. Was there any point in time when the issue of the quality of the food was viewed as a problem by the soldiers?
Well, when I was in Yundum, during my recruit training, I think we were not always very happy with the food, but then again, at that time, I think our salaries were about 186, and then 60 was being deducted as for feeding. Okay, so Well, there were always some issues about whether the food was good enough, whether we were having a fair deal or whatever. But by and large, well, it was not out of the normal, certainly.